Authorities in eastern Libya say more than 5,300 people have died following massive flooding in the Mediterranean coastal city of Derna. Officials there suggest around 25% of the city has been destroyed. Survivors have described the floods as being tsunami-like after 2 dams burst during torrential rain. The death toll is expected to rise further, with the UN putting the number of missing at 10,000.
A child pulled from the mud and rubble, all that's left in this part of Derna. Her father survived the floods, but is helpless as his daughter's body is recovered. Thousands of people have been killed, and yet thousands more are still missing as teams search the wreckage for bodies.
This is a disaster. My sister, her children, her grandchildren, a total of 11 people. Disaster in every sense of the word. My nephews, my people, my family.
Facing the deaths of their loved ones, tens of thousands of people in Derna and surrounding areas have also been left without homes, food, clean water or medicine. And anger is mounting. Years of mismanagement had left the city's infrastructure crumbling.
We have warned the authorities for weeks, no, for years, that the dam had cracks and needed to be maintained. We said it and nobody listened to us, and now the whole of Derna is flooded.
More than a decade of conflict and no central government has left much of Libya's infrastructure neglected. The UN recognised administration based in Tripoli does not have jurisdiction over the flood-hit areas. The east is ruled by a rival administration headed by military leader Khalifa Haftar, who led an attempted coup in 2014. Some aid and foreign rescue teams have arrived, but with the country divided and roads washed away, international help is struggling to reach those in need.
Nothing is working here. No national authorities, nothing. Have a look and do something about it. We're experiencing a great injustice.
Many survivors in Derna have been left to dig through the mud and debris themselves, looking for their loved ones. The search for bodies has also moved out to sea, where many of the thousands still missing were washed away.
This is a situation that's nothing short of horrifying. I'd like to bring in Anas El-Ghamati, a Libyan political analyst, joining us today from Istanbul. Thank you for taking the time. We heard there in our report, Abdulhamid Dbeibeh, the Libyan prime minister, saying that he had postponed accepting international assistance. Does that surprise you, given the magnitude of this tragedy?
It does shock me in many ways because it's endemic of the systematic failures of governance that we've seen now for a decade. 2 rival governments that are perfectly happy to rule over the rubble whilst their citizens lay underneath it. And I think it goes down to the core of what we've seen, the images coming out of Derna, people today waking up, tired faces, mud all over their faces, 3 days without food, water, sanitation, without the supply lines, because it's the supply lines that will keep that city, the 40,000 that we know now are displaced from the city, almost half the population that will keep them going. They need everything. Of course, they need international search and rescue teams. They need technical experts that are going to help them try to recover and identify some of those that are missing. But 40,000 people need every bit of help that they can get. And so whilst the officials that we know, particularly those that were responsible for the collapse of the dam, the Libyan National Army, whilst those officials may have failed down now, it's the mainly courageous citizens that were in your program that haven't, because they're the ones that are driving the ambulances, they're the ones that are baking the bread, they're the ones that are trying to tire themselves out looking under the rubble, but they need all the help that they can get. And so when it comes to what the rival governments can do, they've presided over this crisis for a decade. It's the man-made negligence, it's the man-made incompetence, it's the inability to warn their own citizens when they had the time, the hours and days before this storm hit eastern Libya. They had the time to be able to go and warn, evacuate, try and identify a way in which to give the lives of the citizens of Derna, maybe not the city's structures, but the lives, a second chance. And they haven't. That criminal negligence means that they're not the right people to be the custodians of today's coordination efforts. That should be the Red Crescent that is today in Libya, that is operating with its courageous staff, the activists, the volunteers, the brave people that are still in the city. They need all the help they can get.
Yeah.
And frankly, the local authorities there, the LNA or the rival administration in the West, they can step aside. They've done enough.
Well, let me jump in there. As you say, it's the ordinary citizens being left to pick up the pieces. Do you think that there are, though, going to be political consequences for how this response has been unfolding?
I certainly think there needs to be a post-mortem, figuratively and literally, after the events. And I think, we've seen this in the region before. We saw the port blast in Beirut, a completely man-made tragedy that didn't need to happen. This is the very same case. Criminal negligence that goes back to the Gaddafi regime hasn't maintained that dam since the 1980s. The LNA that has also been involved, the Libyan National Army, that has been involved in gutting the public infrastructure in eastern Libya, destroying the roads, destroying buildings, using it for scrap metal that they would sell for pennies on the dollar and export to Turkey for billions of dollars a year. That is the quality and the fiber of those individuals that are today saying, I'm here to help you and keep you safe, when they've spent the last 10 years stealing from not only the public money, the public infrastructure, and waging war against their own citizens. That's the quality and the fiber of Libya's unelected political elite. And if we had elections, only several weeks ago, elections were blocked in Derna. What could have that elected council have done, the experts that have done? So not only is it there needs to be an inquiry and a public investigation about what happened in Derna and the events that led to this, but there needs to be a drastic change. Libyans have wanted elections for 10 years. They've had them blocked by a UN process that is rigged. It is not designed to allow for elections. It's designed to create unappointed governments that will block elections. How do we know that? Because Libya's had 8 of them in the last decade. Each of them have promised elections and they've never delivered. So there's criminal culpability on the local level. There is international complicity at the national level. And Libyans are the ones that are the blameless victims of this. They're picking up the pieces and they have to build it tomorrow. And they need to do that without the kind of criminal accomplices that have been the custodians of the last 10 years.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us on DW News. That is Libya analyst Anas El Ghamati. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.